What's up, everybody? Welcome to the video. This one we're breaking down the Thursday Night Football showdown slate for DraftKings and FanDuel. We have a good game once again as the Philadelphia Eagles take on the Minnesota Vikings, and what should be a pretty high-scoring game. Lots of fun players to talk about. And as I always do in these videos, we're going to go position by position, team by team. We'll put a lamp as we progress through it. Then on the optimizer at the end to see who is popping the most as of right now. Anyway, if this is your first time here, my name is Chris Pinnell. I break down NFL DFS each and every single week on this channel. So if you're going to keep coming back and you do enjoy today's content, or even if you don't, consider leaving a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet done so. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or mean to me in the comments or call me ugly, feel free to do that. I'd love to hear from you. And as always, if you guys ever want access to anything that I do show you here on YouTube, you can get that link down below in the description or the pinned comment completely free for a week over on the Patreon, because they do offer free week trials, projections, optimizer, ownership projections, the whole slate statted out, and a bunch more. So if you do find that interesting, you know where to find it. More than happy to have you. And if not, totally fine. Let's dive right into it, though. We have quarterbacks up here, and we have Jalen Hurts and Kirk Cousins, which two very different types of quarterbacks, but both guys are certainly viable on this slate. And it's not a question of if we're playing these guys. We're definitely playing them. Now, Kirk Cousins, he's not in the same tier as Jalen Hurts. But what makes these guys different is that Jalen Hurts has massive rushing upside. Kirk Cousins does not. So what does that mean? Well, it means that Jalen Hurts is going to have a much better projection, obviously. But as far as roster construction, I'm always more of a fan of rostering the pass catching options and then flexing my quarterback just for tournaments, because like if Kirk Cousins goes off, that means one of his wide receivers or tight end like TJ Hawkinson had to have gone off, because Kirk Cousins isn't getting you 70 yards on the ground and 2 rushing touchdowns. On Jalen Hurts, he can certainly do that. I'm not saying you can't do the same thing where you have AJ Brown in the captain spot and then Jalen Hurts in the flex. I will certainly have lineups like that. But Jalen Hurts can get the job done by himself on the ground, and his wide receivers could suck. Get you 3 rushing touchdowns and 100 rushing yards. Not saying it's going to happen, but it's certainly on the cards here. If you look at the projections that I have on this slate, I currently have Hurts at 25.7 with the plus matchup here, 50 rushing yards, 0.6 rushing touchdowns with 260 yards through the air. And this Minnesota Vikings defense is definitely nothing to be too concerned about. Kirk Cousins, I got him for around 250 passing yards. Obviously, it was well above that last week versus Tampa Bay, got over 300 passing yards. Even though he got off to a rocky start, got around 16.5 points, which I think is fair. The Philly defense, not really something I tend to pick on too much, but we can't get too picky on a showdown slate. They were first DVOA versus the pass last year, 7th fewest points allowed per game to the quarterback position. So obviously Hurts and the Eagles are in a much better spot, and that would be indicated by their implied team total of nearly 28 at home as a 7-point favorite. Obviously like both, but like I said, Kirk Cousins, if he goes off, he's got to be married to one of his wide receivers or tight ends, because that's the only way he's going to go off is if they go off as well. Jalen Hurts, wow, that's also possible. Add in the fact that he can get it done by himself, that makes him more worthy of the captain spot, in my opinion. All right, so moving on to the running backs. So we'll start with the Minnesota Vikings here first, because they're a lot easier to talk about. Philly is a whole different story, but we have pretty much a one-man show with Alexander Mattison. Ty Chandler is there, but only played, I believe, 17% of the snaps last week. Madison got just under 75%, and then obviously the fullback CJ Ham involved as well. But if you're using a running back on this team, pretty much Madison is going to be the guy. Eagles are pretty much mid-pack versus the run versus running backs last season, whether it's yards allowed, fantasy points allowed per game, whatever it may be. So it's like just a middling play for me. I'm like not going my way to play Alexander Madison, but I'm not against it either. If they get around the goal line, obviously there's always the chance for a goal line plunge, which on a showdown slate, $7,600 you will take. So not like a favorite play of mine, but he is in the player pool. Now we'll move on to the Eagles backfield, and this is where we have a lot of question marks, because it looks like that Kenneth Gainwell is going to be out for this game, who got the lion's share of the work last week at the running back position. And now we're left with DeAndre Swift and Boston Scott for the guys that were active last week. Rashad Penny was a healthy and active, but I'm just going to assume that he's going to take on that Kenny Gainwell role as just getting the bulk of the carries on the ground. Now, I still think Boston Scott will get some, but I do think Penny will be the guy just getting the bulk of the work. And DeAndre Swift, I feel like won't get too much of a bump here, maybe slightly, but I don't think that he's a guy that this team wants to run into the ground and get a boatload of carries. So for me, Penny makes a lot of sense at $1,600 versus Minnesota. If they can get around the goal line, just get into the end zone, easy 6 points there, and hopefully get us 40, 50 rushing yards on the ground. Again, $1,600, kind of hard to beat. All these guys are going to be playable. I think Swift and Scott will be the tournament plays, and if Penny does have that Gainwell role, which is more of an assumption right now, I mean, optimizers are going to love it. And then moving on to the wide receivers, it's kind of easy on the slate because we have a bunch of studs, and that's where the ball goes for the most part. So let's start with the Eagles group here first. We have the two big dogs, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith. This is basically all of your production in the passing attack for the Eagles. So those are the main targets. Now, if you're looking for the secondary guys or I don't even know if I'm going to call him secondary because there's Dallas Goedert, and then you have DeAndre Swift out of the backfield as well. But we have Kes Watkins and Olamide Zacchaeus, I believe that's how you pronounce his name. Looking at the snap counts last week, Watkins played 80% of the snaps, so he's at least on the field, and we know he's got some deep play upsides. So there's a chance for a home run hitter, but there's always a decent chance for a gooser as well. So at $3,000, he is definitely only a tournament play. As far as Zacchaeus is concerned, 11% of the snaps last week. He catches one pass. I mean, it's $200. It's not terrible, but you're just gonna have to hope that he gets really lucky there because you really can't bank on too much of a projection as far as targets are concerned. And then moving on to the Vikings, they have someone named Justin Jefferson. I've heard he's pretty darn good at football, so if you can afford him, obviously I highly recommend jamming him in. And after that, it gets a little bit interesting. We have Jordan Addison, the rookie, who caught a nice little long touchdown last week. He played around 50% of the snaps, and then KJ Osborne at $5,000. Obviously not as exciting as guys like Jefferson or Jordan Addison, but he played around 90% of the snaps, so he's going to be on the field. After that, we didn't see any other wide receiver play for the Vikings, so they made it nice and simple for us. It's Jefferson, Addison, and Osborne, and then try to mix and match. Obviously, Jefferson's on a whole other tier. Addison, Osborne, I prefer Addison. I think he has more upside, but if you're looking for a guy that's on the field a lot at 5K, Osborne is your guy. Then moving on to tight ends here, we pretty much have two guys for each team. TJ Hawkinson, well, actually, both teams are very similar, where they have a studded tight end, and then they have their back. You have TJ Hawkinson in Minnesota, and you have Dallas Goedert over on Philly. Josh Oliver's backing up TJ Hawkinson, and then Jack Stoll on the other side, although Stoll's not really in the same kind of category as Dallas Goedert. But let's start here with the Vikings group first. So TJ, we know he's one of the best tight ends in football, and ever since getting traded to Minnesota, has not had a game worse than 6 targets. Started off the year with 9 targets last week, around 11 fantasy points. Should get peppered with targets once again. So if you have the money for him, love him in tournaments. $300 not a bad price point, so I could see you getting there really in any format. But I do think his backup, Josh Oliver here at $800 is not the worst cheap play on the slate. So if we're hunting for value, he had 3 targets last week, 3 catches, 31 receiving yards. Not a bad day, $800. Obviously, just because something happened last week does not mean it's going to happen again this week. But he played nearly 50% of the snaps, and if you're going to be on the field half the game, it might just fall into 2 targets. That's all we need here, $800. So he is firmly in play as a value guy. And then for the Eagles, Dallas Goedert, we know he's got some high upside as well, but did nothing last week. 0 fantasy points, which that's what can happen with the Philadelphia Eagles. Our team likes to run the football, and there's mouths to feed here. We have A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and then the 12 running backs that they have, and Jalen Hurts has to run the ball as well. So there's just a lot to go around, but we've seen Dallas Goedert games show up here and there. There's massive upside, so he's in the tournament pool, but not really a cash game play for me. Jack's always on the field, but not really much of a receiving threat at all. Then defenses and kickers, the most exciting part of all of this, I am sure. Now, I'm not usually one that likes to play defenses, especially in the captain spot, especially for a near 50-point over-under game. Past 2 showdown slates, which obviously have nothing to do with this. Just because something happened in a previous game does not mean it will happen in the next game, which has nothing to do with anything. Don't try to draw conclusions there, but absolute nuke jobs from the defenses. Dallas Cowboys scored 1 million points in the captain spot versus the New York Giants. It was getting tough to watch at that point. And then we also saw the New York Jets put up a really good game versus the Buffalo Bills, which really wouldn't have expected that to happen. I thought the under was pretty likely the way both teams play, but I was not expecting the Jets defense to have quite the day that they had. About 4 turnovers and then that punt return touchdown just as icing on the cake at the end. But what I'm trying to say here is that defenses are really random. If I had to pick one, obviously I'd pick the Eagles, but really excited about both offenses here, so I don't really think I'm going to get too much of either. And then the kickers, you never really know what to expect with kickers. If they hit their field goals, they hit their field goals, and they become decent value plays. If not, it is what it is. Cash games, I don't mind them in high-scoring games because it just means that they're going to be in scoring position. You just kind of hope that the drives stall out so you get your field goals instead of extra points, but I'm fine with either, probably around 20-30% of my builds. All right, so moving over to our lineup because we got to build one because I promised it. Now, don't copy and paste this. If you are stealing lineups from YouTube, you deserve to lose. I'm just trying to build a lineup that is correlated and trying to tell myself maybe a bit of a story or something, which is what you're going to have to do on a showdown slate. And I feel like everyone's going to want to captain Jalen Hurts. I'm assuming we're in the optimizer. That's like going to be 100% Jalen Hurts in the captain spot. So let's get a little bit different. Let's put in Justin Jefferson in the captain spot, which that's the flex spot. 18.6. That is extremely expensive. That's what, $1,500 more than Jalen Hurts. So yeah, it's probably going to be a little bit tough to get to, but I think we have enough value plays to make that work. I could definitely see this being a more stars and scrubs type build on this showdown slate when you have such a top heavy kind of construction where you have Hurts, Jefferson, Brown, Cousins, Monty, but just so much studs in the mid range. Obviously, doesn't look too exciting. But if we have Justin Jefferson, we don't have to, but I think it would make sense to get Kirk Cousins in the flex spot. And then after that, I think you pretty much have to play Jalen Hurts. So we're going to try to make that work. And obviously, we've eaten up a bunch of salary. We have just under $4,000 left. But we talked about a couple of value plays that I think make a lot of sense here. So we can roll with Josh Oliver, which the Vikings will run two tight end sets quite a bit. And like I said, he was on the field around 50% of the time. And if we could just get a target or two, I'm not expecting 3 for 31 again. I feel like that's pretty high for what we should expect from Oliver. But if he can get a catch or two, that's all I'm asking for. So we'll plug him in there. That's going to free up some salary. That gives us $5,000. I believe. Let me check and see if we got news. So yeah, Kenny Gainwell was out. That happened during my video because he was not officially out yet. So that is good news for Rashad Penny or really just anybody in that backfield. So let's assume Penny gets a lot of the Kenny Gainwell touches at $1,600. That looks pretty good to me. And that's going to give us just under $8,500 for the last spot. So even though we do have a few studs in there, we can fit another pretty expensive player in. So I do like this type of build. So we can get Alexander Madison at $7,600. That's going to leave some money on the table. So if you wanted to get away from Penny and you wanted to go up to like a Boston Scott, you can certainly do that. So we'll take Penny out. And I think that just fits in Boston Scott. So whether you're more comfortable with Scott or Rashad Penny, that type of build would work. But there's many ways you can go. Think for yourself and build your own lineups. I'll be building 150, so not sure exactly where I'm going to end up yet. All right, like I said at the beginning, just wanted to run the optimizer here to see who is popping as of right now. I have no rules set, no randomness, nothing like that. If you are someone that does seriously build 20, 150 lineups, you really have to play around with settings, make sure you get everything matched up because you're going to need to be highly correlated, have a chance of taking down tournaments more often than not in these showdown contests. So just make sure you are playing around with that, not just running it raw like we are here. So let's look at some of the builds here. Who's popping? Like I said, I would not be surprised if we saw Jalen Hurts in every single lineup here. We just ran a quick 20. And just by eyeballing it here, it looks like Hurts is in just about every single one. I see a Kirk Cousins straight at the bottom. I see a Rashad Penny somehow in the captain spot as well. I guess that's with the assumption that he does get the bulk of Kenny Gainwell's touches. Now, these are not final projections or anything. And if you do want access to this, and I'll have it updated up until game time, obviously, you can get that link in the link down below in the description or the pinned comment. You can try it out completely free for a week if you want. But these are not final by any means. Look at some of the players who popped the most. Rashad Penny getting yammed in there at $1,600, which I get it. Jalen Hurts in the captain spot getting jammed. Kirk Cousins, Swift's popping quite a bit as well at 60%. Jefferson. So like I said, it's kind of a bit of a stars and scrubs build. It looks like I don't see any Josh Oliver popping just off the rip for 20 lineups. So maybe I was being a little bit aggressive on that when we were hand building just a little bit ago. But either way, not too surprised there. Looking at the teams, slight lean on the Philly. Then it has other statistics on there as well if you're interested in that. With that being said, that's all I got for you guys this week. If you did enjoy, or even if you did, so leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet done so. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, leave them down below. I'll be more than happy to answer them. That we show the best of luck. I'll see you on Friday, I believe, for my core plays video. I'll see you all